Hi, everybody. Klint Kendrick here, and this is another episode of the Master Your Merger video blogs. So I've spent the last couple of weeks really pouring through all of the reports that we've been getting on M&A from firms like Bain, Deloitte, KPMG, and PwC, and I noticed something striking. And this may really remind you of the phrase that you've probably heard if you've been around M&A long enough, which is we don't rise to our level of ambition, we fall to the level of our preparation. So as I've been looking at these reports, everybody's talking about AI, they're talking about valuations, they're talking about speed. But across the board, there's almost one thing everybody admits that they still get wrong, and that's the people due diligence. So there's a big blind spot in the reports. So let's start with what the big firms are quietly saying. So KPMG says, mismanaging people and cultures is the reason for 2/3 of failed transactions. Look, that's not a rounding error. That's the biggest reason deals are not delivering. Deloitte, in their PE Human Capital series, warns that firms that fail to assess leadership capability and alignment before close face longer ramp-up periods and higher turnover risk. That's not just a people problem. It isn't just an HR issue. It's a value problem. PwC, they flag culture and change management as, quote, the most unpredictable factors in deal outcomes. And yet they go on to say that fewer than half of companies include culture in their diligence work. And Bain doesn't mince words. They say, start planning your integration during diligence. Many companies don't start thinking seriously about integration until the deal is signed, and that's always too late. And I have to agree with Bain on that. So the message is clear. Everyone knows that skipping people diligence is a risk, but a lot of firms skip it anyway. So let's get practical. What does good people due diligence actually look like? And look, I wrote a whole book on it, so I've got a couple of ideas. Good people diligence is not just asking HR for headcount and an org chart. What does it really mean? It really means leadership mapping, like who's running this business formally and informally. What are their capabilities, and are those capabilities aligned with your value thesis? There have been a number of times when I've sent up the warning that the leaders that are coming in are not ready to run that business. And a lot of times HR doesn't really get paid attention to because that's the way deals have worked historically. And it has been so frustrating in my career to watch the wrong leadership team brought in and then watch them absolutely demolish value. And leaders are scratching their heads wondering what happened. Well, I can tell you, we brought in the wrong leadership team. So we need to do that leadership due diligence. We also need to do cultural compatibility checks. And so I think about things like what behaviors are getting rewarded today with that seller. Are they going to work in the new organization? And even though I have a PhD, it doesn't require a PhD to do this. It requires structure. That means you're doing some interviews, you're doing some surveys, you're really listening to people to try and understand the culture. And then finally, there are some risks that should be deal blockers, like who's burned out and going to leave, who's already got a foot out the door, who's critical to customers but completely unknown to corporate. And people diligence is where you find that information. Now, sometimes you can't learn those things before you close the deal because you don't have access to the employees, but you can find out a lot of this stuff during the diligence process if you're willing to spend the time. And you really are going to need to spend that time either immediately after you close the deal and get access to the employees, or preferably during the diligence phase, because the diligence phase is where you find those landmines before you step on them. You just need to ask the right questions with the right framework and have the courage to slow down just enough to see the road ahead. So in 2025, financial and operational diligence are really sharper than ever because AI is scanning everything. And unfortunately, I think that makes the people blind spot even more dangerous. Look, I can hook up a machine to look at supply chain risk. I can have it look at the financials. I can have it scour legal documents. But what it doesn't do as well is ask whether the acquired leadership team really trusts their own CEO. Right? You can model retention curves with data, but you can't really figure out who those two informal influences are that are really holding that team together. You've got to start talking to people to get that. And that's where deals start to go sideways. So Bain, KPMG, Deloitte, they all point out that what happens when you ignore that people side is you lose value, you lose momentum, and let's face it, you lose your best people. And when they walk out the door, they're taking all of that value with them. So here's the shift. The firms that win in this environment, they won't just be faster, they're going to be smarter. right? They're going to be smarter because they'll start treating people as part of diligence, not as a fire drill that they do post-close. So look, if this resonates, it's the kind of thing that we're going to be unpacking at the People Synergy Summit. That's a virtual conference that we run a couple of times a year through Master Your Merger. The hybrid summit is coming up September 16th and 17th, and virtual attendance is free if you go to peoplesynergysummit.com. So we'll be talking about diligence as we have our conversations. We're really going to be talking about people and leadership and culture. And through that, you'll learn some of the things that you need to about how you can embed people diligence in your M&A process without slowing your deals down. You'll hear from practitioners who are getting this right, both in private equity and in corporate M&A. And I would really love to see you there. Look, it's free. There's no reason not to come hang out with us. So if you've ever looked back at a deal and thought, we really should have known that before day one, the summit is a chance to learn how to do that. So stick around. We're going to do episode 3 next week, and we're going to dive in episode 3 into why agility isn't just a tech skill, but it's a people strategy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the summit.